There's so many aspects of my diagnosis, so much of the detail that I can remember vividly, even though it was almost a decade ago now. It's one of those moments in life that really does stick with you. There was one particular instance that I'll never forget. I'd had an appointment with the specialist. I think it was the second or third appointment, and by this time I'd had my initial diagnosis, but I was still having scans and going through the process. And I was still in a daze. I didn't know what was what at that point. I remember walking into this neurology clinic, and there were about 10 other patients there in the waiting room. They all looked like they had Parkinson's, and I should say this was in Thailand, where I eventually got diagnosed. I had a second home there, and I wasn't getting anywhere with the NHS in the UK, so I paid for a private neurologist over there and got diagnosed almost instantly. Anyway, the thing about Thai people is that they're normally very warm and welcoming, particularly of foreigners. They're intrigued. They stare at you, or at least they stare at me, trying to work out where I'm from, and all in a very friendly way, and normally involves a smile as a sort of standard universal greeting. Thais are known to be very smiley people like that. Well, on this particular occasion, when I walked into the waiting room, I got the stares, but none of the smiles. Which is weird and unnerving. They were just staring at me, which made me feel uncomfortable. But at the time, I had other things to worry about, so I didn't give it much thought. It was only years later, when I was looking back, I realised that it's not that they didn't want to smile, it's that they couldn't smile. One of the cruelties of this condition is that it can lead to facial masking. The raised eyebrows, you don't blink as much, and you lose some facial expressions, including the ability to smile. And it just made me realise that there are so many things that this condition takes from you. But when it starts to take your identity, something as simple as a smile, it's just cruel. It's not to say it will happen to me, and everybody's Parkinson's journey is different and unique to them. And fortunately, I still have my smile, and I intend to use it, and this sounds a bit cheesy, but when I think back to that day, I'd like to think that even though they couldn't show it, that they were smiling on the inside. Initially, I thought the story of my diagnosis was unusual, but having met other people with the condition, it turns out to be a fairly common story, unfortunately. The first symptom that I had, or at least I noticed, was a tremor in my left hand. I was sitting in the office one day, typing away, and I just caught it. I thought it was odd, but I didn't really think much about it. It would happen occasionally. It wouldn't really bother me. It didn't impact me in any meaningful way, and I felt fine otherwise. But around this time, I was seeing my GP about something else, and I decided to mention it, almost in a kind of sorry to bother you kind of way. He took one look at me, and he just dismissed it. He suggested I drink less coffee and I'd be fine. But the tremor persisted for several months, so some blood tests were done, and all it revealed was an overactive thyroid at the time. But there's a particular type of thyroid condition called Graves' disease, a symptom of which is a tremor, a different kind of tremor, as it turns out, not the resting tremor that you have in Parkinson's. But I'd ended up going on this wild goose chase over several months, having various tests done on my thyroid. It turned out the thyroid problem resolved itself, and I was still left with this tremor, and it was left at that. He didn't pursue it. I didn't pursue it, and at no point was it thought to be a neurological thing. I think in his mind, and probably my mind, I didn't fit the bill for a condition like Parkinson's. It wasn't until a few months later, while I was in Thailand, I was referred to a private neurologist there, a movement disorder specialist, a wonderful woman, And this is another moment I remember very clearly. She greeted me in the waiting room, which at the time I thought was nice of her. But reflecting back, I think what she was actually doing, she wanted to observe my movement as I walked from the waiting room to her office. She wanted to observe my walking, my gait, my posture, my balance, my stride length, whether my arm was swinging or not, which it wasn't. These are all telltale signs of Parkinson's, and I was oblivious to all of it, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm pretty sure she was able to diagnose me before I even sat down. Anyway, she went on to do some routine, very basic movement tests, finger tap test, touch your nose, observe my handwriting, and various other balance and walking tests, which took all of 5 minutes. And at the end, she said in a very calm voice, in a very matter-of-fact way, "You have Parkinson's, or some form of Parkinson's." And I couldn't believe it, not least because there was no actual test done, no blood test, no urine test, no lab test of any kind. It's not like COVID where there's a swab test that gives you a result back in 15 minutes. It's nothing like that. It was nothing more scientific than a very basic physical examination, which, by the way, is the same way disease progression is tracked. Every time I see my specialist now, which is about every 6 months, that's all they have to go off. Anyway, I went on to have various scans, and at each stage it was just reinforcing the original diagnosis until I was put on some of the medication which I responded to. It alleviated some of the symptoms, although it wasn't immediately obvious to me as my symptoms weren't severe in the first place. But that was the final surefire test that I had the condition. So in a way, it's both a difficult condition to diagnose, but on the other hand, to the trained eye at least, if you know what you're looking for, it's the easiest thing to diagnose. And the irony is now, at this point, even I could diagnose somebody with the condition. Well, obviously, I was in shock when I was first told. I also had a lot of questions, though. There was a lot of uncertainty, and I was hunting for information. And early on, without any kind of support network, I did what I think a lot of people do in this situation. I turned to Google, Dr. Google, and I found a view of Parkinson's that was thoroughly depressing, mainly referring to motor symptoms, the physical side of Parkinson's, and a lot of confusing terminology, lots of information about treatments, drugs mainly, and hardly anything on the wider forms of treatment, like the sort of the holistic approach, which is coming to the fore now, like the benefits of exercise, for example. And there's very little on young onset Parkinson's, people that are diagnosed under the age of 50, which is about 10% of the Parkinson's population. And bear in mind, this was in the days before social media took off, and like with so many other things, social media has been both good and bad for Parkinson's, but at least there's more information available now. So initially I had a lot of questions for the neurologist, and all my questions seemed to start with how long? Not how long do I have, as I knew it wasn't directly sort of life-threatening, but I knew it was life-changing. I knew that much for sure. So I had questions like how long until my walking was affected, how long until I have balance issues, until my speech is impacted, how long can I work for, how long can I drive, travel, and how long. Everything was about how long, and it felt like I was on a countdown from that point, and I wanted to know what was coming and when it was coming, and of course she couldn't answer those questions. No one could, which added to the frustration and the worry, but she couldn't answer because everyone's journey with Parkinson's is different. The type of symptoms, how quickly the disease progresses, and how well people respond to treatments can vary quite significantly from person to person. I'm struck by this every time I meet somebody else with the condition, how different we each are. Anyway, at the end of our consultation, she could see how anxious I was, and she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Look, there's a chance that you could come back to see me in 10 years' time, and you'll still be leading a perfectly normal life. And to the average person, they wouldn't even know you had this condition." And I thought, no. From what little I knew of Parkinson's, or what I thought I knew, in 10 years' time, I'm going to be in a bad way. So I dismissed it. I thought she was just trying to say something comforting and positive, and I was busy preparing for the worst. Well, I'm hoping to see her next year, 10 years on, and I'd like to tell her she was right, and perhaps I should have believed her. And instead of counting down the days, I should be enjoying each day for what it is. And there's probably a lesson in there for all of us, whether we have Parkinson's or not. Well, I know this sounds strange, as I've just been talking about uncertainty, but the overwhelming feeling I had when I received my final diagnosis, the final confirmation, was one of relief. Genuine relief, because I could finally put a name to it. I had some certainty. I could start to go on with life. It was also relief in the sense that it wasn't anything more serious. During the course of my diagnosis, and bear in mind this went on for the best part of a year, one of the brain scans I had revealed something akin to a birthmark on my brain. At the time, they thought it could lead to an aneurysm or a stroke, and there was talk of having a brain surgery there and then, and really scary stuff. Fortunately, subsequent scans revealed it wasn't anything serious, and it was quite common, and it's likely I had it since birth. So in the end, being diagnosed with little old Parkinson's turned out to be a relief that it wasn't anything more serious.